Welcome, welcome. And gosh, we are getting close to the end of the first parsha of Genesis. We're not going to get there today, but it is definitely in sight. So here we go. I'm going to turn on the share screen. Let me make sure I'm close to it. There we are. One moment. And I'm going to do this. Let's see. Let's see if this works. Sorry. Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah, that works. Okay. And it's just taking a while to load. And here we are. Good. You should be able to see something. Okay. Very good. So remember, we were doing the generations, and I believe you're going to see this in a second, right? You can all see this. I'll make it a little bit bigger. And this is, of course, right? Adam lived 930 years in the year 1. And this is when he gives birth, he sires Seth. This is how long he lives, etc. So we're seeing the years go by, right? These are the actual years, right? These, of course, are how old they are when they sire their their first son, right? So here is the flood, and you can figure it out that it's in the year 1658. Let me make it a little bigger and see if we can. Yep, 1658. We are on to Lemech. We got all the way down to there, and we see that Methuselah dies in the year of the flood, and this is when Noah is sorry. This is how long Lemech lives, and let's see, Noah is here, okay, and he is going to be 500 years old, 1558, right? When he has Shem. And Shem is going to, okay, this is how long Noah is going to live. Here's the date of the Tower of Babel. So we see that the Bible does give us a fairly clear chronology. These are the 10 generations. Sorry about that. All right, from Adam to Noah, right? 10 generations. And then another 10 generations to Abraham. And let's see, I'm trying to see here. Yeah, that's so Abraham is actually born before the Tower of Babel, by the way. Look at that. Look at that. Because that's the Tower of Babel. So interesting. And how Adam lived, right? All the way through. Look at this. He's alive. Up through Lemech. Up through Lemech, he's still alive. That's how many generations he gets to see. So let's go back. This is where we are right now, right here. So let's get into here. I don't know if we made our bracha. I don't believe we did. So
no, we made bracha. No.
Okay. Good memory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And incidentally, what I really feel the Torah, one of the important things that the Torah is trying to do for us is to help us understand our place spiritually in this world. And the fact that here we have the fact that we are created, we come into this world, we don't even know really how that happened, how we gained a consciousness or anything like that. And then what kind of lives do we live? Do we live our lives with a deep, deep, deep sense of appreciation for our Creator, for the one that made it possible for us to come into this world? Or do we live basically selfish lives, or looking for pleasure-seeking lives? Not in any way that Judaism denies human pleasure or says that it isn't legitimate, but what it tries to do, it tries to elevate the process of that gaining pleasure to make sure that it isn't just a selfish act, but that it's a way of sharing. There are ways in which to elevate these things. And we're seeing what's happening. And in our course today, we're going to see some specifics as to how human beings are behaving. And what does that have to say about life today and what's happening to the world? And so the Torah in some ways has a warning about about not being aware of this and not really knowing our place. And of course, I know for a fact that there are other religions which talk about being asleep, that use a metaphor of being asleep in not knowing where we really are. And the fact that we are blowing the shofar these days, a month before Rosh Hashanah, because we're saying that we are held accountable for our actions, that shofar is like an alarm or alarm clock going off and saying, wake up, know what's happening. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of it today. So, Vaychi Lemech acharehu liyoto et Noach. Lemech lived after he had sired Noah, right, or begat Noah. It's the best verb I can think of. Chamesh v'tishim shana. It's 590 years. The Chamesh me'ot shana, and another 500 years. So 595 years. Vayoled banim uvanot, and he begat sons and daughters. Vayhi kol yemei Lemech, and all the days of Lemech were Sheva v'shivim shana, 77 and 70 years, Usheva ma'ot shana, and 700 years, Vayamot, and he died. Vayhi Noach ben chamesh ma'ot shana, and Noah was 500 years old. Vayoled Noach et Shem et Cham v'et Yafet, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? Yafet. Commentary. Ben chamesh ma'ot shana. So one thing you notice, and we'll go quickly back to the other chart. These are how old they were. Look how old they were. And basically they were, so Enoch was here. This is how old they were when they sired, when they begat, right? And let's see, he was 500 years when he got, so this, let's see, this is adding on to this. So let's see, yeah. So we're saying that Noah was 500 years. So all these people were much younger. Look at this, very, very young when they begat their children. And here's Noah, 500 years old, right? 1056 or 1050, 1050. I can't really see, it looks like a 6, but look at this is 1558. So I guess we have to say that this must be 1058, right? So it's 500 years. And this is remarkable, right? Remarkable. Look, everyone else, and later on you see they're quite young when they, relatively speaking, when they get their first child. So Noah's 500 years, and this causes a question. This raises, of course, a strange. Why so late? Okay, so let's take a look. Ben chamesh ma'ot shana. He was 500 years old. Amar Rabbi Yudin. So Rashi is quoting a midrash, where the midrash quotes a rabbi. What's interesting about rabbinic material is that it gives it assigns quotations to different names. I mean, there are lots of different rabbis who are actually cited by name. And I wonder to myself if part of that has to do with the memorization of all this material, that at one point it was actually all memorized. And you know how well you can memorize things if you can remember the author of particular statements. So this is Rabbi Yudin. Ma tam, why? What's the reason? Kol hadorot holidu lakaf shana, that all these generations basically begat, they had their first child at 100 years old, approximately, right? Vezel chamesh meot, and this one 500 years. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Yudin is explaining the answer, giving the answer. Said the Holy One, blessed be He, Im Risha'im He, if his children, right, if his offspring are wicked. Yovedu or Yovdu Bamayim. They're going to perish in the water. Vera, and it's going to be bad, La Tzadik Zeh, for this righteous person. In other words, losing children. He's going to lose all these children because they're wicked and they have to perish in the flood. And I don't want to cause them all this pain, this emotional pain, distress. There are other manuscripts, Farim Achirim, the Zera Shel Tzadik Zeh. And he's saying, instead of Tzadik, it says it's going to be awful for the seed of this righteous person. Interesting, subtle distinction, meaning that here they are, the children, even though themselves are wicked, they're still children of a righteous person. And they are going to have to face a horrible end. And there's something being said here when your parent, the role of a parent in terms of protecting your children, and that if you're a righteous person, even if your children aren't so righteous, there's something that calls upon itself divine mercy on their behavior. So that's, I think, the implication of this particular version of Rashi's text here. So this is if they're wicked. V'im tzadikim heim, but if all these children, right, if he starts procreating at 100 years or less, and the flood is going to come in his 600th year, he's going to have a lot of kids, and they're going to be righteous. Tzadikim heim, but if they are righteous, atriach alav lasot tevot harbe, I would have to put him to the trouble of making lots and lots of arks to carry all these children. Kavash et mayano. So basically, literally, it means God overpowered. Okay, sorry, I obviously misspelled this. Let me do that. Overpowered his well, right? In other words, he was unable to have children. V'lo holid ad chamesh me'ot shana, and so he didn't beget children until he was 500 years old. Why? What's significant about that? Kedei shelo yehe Yefet Gadol b'banav, so that Japheth, who was the oldest of his sons, Ra'ui le'onshin, deserving of punishment. Ra'ui basically means of age. So you know that that up to the age of 13, if a child misbehaves, or if a child, let's say, commits sins, he's considered to be under the authority of his father, and his father is considered responsible for his punishment. In other words, or the father will be punished for the sins of his child because he has that authority. So there is actually a blessing that you say at a bar mitzvah, which basically blesses God for reaching this stage where you are no longer going to be punished if your child, in fact, sins. Well, obviously, people were much more mature at the age of 13 back then, years and years and years ago, than they are now. But so I'm sure it's all, changed. And of course, this custom is not one that is basically practiced of making this particular blessing. But the point is that at this particular stage, what we're saying is that even if Yefet, his oldest son, was not a tzaddik, right, was not a righteous person, he would not be considered punishable, right? He's not of punishable, not age of being in adult. He's not an adult, lifnei hamabul, before the flood occurs. And this is from Bereshit Rabbah, a great midrash on the Torah, dichtiv, as it states, and here it is in Isaiah. This is 62, chapter 62. Ki hanar ben me'ah shana yamut, that it says, for the young person of 100 years shall be put to death, implying that up to that 100-year, that the person is not considered of punishable age. Ra'ui le'onesh la'atid. In other words, in the future, he would be punishable, ra'ui la'onesh, v'chein lifnei matan Torah. And so it was before the giving of the Torah, right? Because this implies that you know what you're supposed to do. And it's possible that he is saying that this is going to be the case in the future. In other words, I think the point of the Isaiah quote is that in the future, God will have such a degree of mercy that he will not hold people responsible until they're 100 years old. And what Rashi is saying is that this was likewise the situation prior to the giving of the Torah. Et Shem, Vet Ham, Vet Yefet. So the sons are listed as Shem, Ham, and Yefet, and Rashi points out, V'halo Yefet Hagadol. But in fact, Yefet was the oldest son. So why is Yefet the last in this list? And why is Shem the first in this list? Ella. So what's the reason? Batchila ata doresh et shehu tzadik v'nolad kishehu ma'ul. So it says at the beginning, in other words, when you're going to list these children, you are going to make a statement. You consider the fact the one who is both a tzaddik, a righteous person, v'nolad kishehu ma'ul, and was born already circumcised. Avraham. So that's one thing. And this idea, I believe, that there's a literary meaning to the fact that this child is born circumcised. And the idea of one of the ideas behind circumcision is that a human being should not act like an animal. So we know that the sexual drive is a very, very powerful emotional, psychological drive within most human beings. And the idea of circumcision is not to act like an animal, but to have control over one's sexual drive. And so the fact that this child is born circumcised, I think, has the literary meaning that this child was controlled themselves and were not acting like an animal. Avraham yatsa mimena, and also the fact that Abraham is descended from Shem, v'chule, etc. And this is also bevereshit rabbah. This is also mentioned in this early midrash. I think the midrash itself was put together. I think it's considered, I don't know if it's like 6th century around then, but of course it quotes rabbis from much earlier periods. It's a question of when this particular work was edited. So look at the depth of penetration here as far as understanding the word, the thoughts and the thought behind all this text that we just read. So, going on. Vahi kehechel ha'adam larov al pnei adama. And it was so that when man began, hechel, began, tchila, began, larov, to multiply, al pnei ha'adama, on the surface of the earth, uvanot, and daughters, yuldu lahem, were born to them. Right? So no Rashi on that. So the men, they started to multiply, many people, and they had daughters. Vayiru b'nei ha'Elohim. Literally, this means the sons of God, but it doesn't. Basically, I'm not saying there isn't an interpretation that goes there, but you're going to see Elohim can also mean powerful people. And there are places where, and Rashi's going to show us that there are places where Elohim refers to judges. So we'll see. We'll take a look at the Rashi. So anyway, these powerful people saw et benot ha'adam. They saw the people's daughters, the men's daughters, ki tovot hena, that they were good. And I believe good, of course, means that they were attractive, very beautiful. Vayichu lahem nashim, and they took for themselves wives or women. They took for themselves women, mikol asher bacharu, from all that they chose. So you can see we're going straight into this kind of human behavior And of course, there is a theory that this might be a reason why people don't like Jews, because they resent.
Rabbi,
Yes, yes,
I have a note. Apparently, one time
yes,
we've discussed this
yes.
as the fact that this little section should come before the last line of five, like 32, or should not even, or
Okay,
that
sorry.
maybe shouldn't even exist.
Oh, yes,
Because, well, I said because the flood is 100 years later, and
yes.
this next section should come before 532. So I wouldn't have come it, unless I thought this up on my own. But because if you when we go into
Hold on a
that next
second.
section,
Golda, make sure you're speaking into the
it repeats
microphone.
it.
You're coming in and out. Yeah,
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Because when we get to the next section, it actually repeats this line at 32.
Yes.
It's also the same as like 9, 10,
Okay, let's take a
or
look.
rather, or the same as 6, 10. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
I don't know that it's exactly repeated. I think there are other ways in which this is repeated in the sense of, again, when something's repeated, what's the first reaction? It's
it's
important.
important.
It's important. Okay.
Okay.
You're going to see Rashi's going to explain these verses, okay?
Okay.
And I don't remember that comment, Golda, which just says,
Okay. This could have been in my brain. That it just
well,
makes
and
sense to
also
me.
remember
I
my
don't know, but I think I got it from something.
okay, and maybe it was me. I don't remember, but it doesn't feel like something I would have said. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
Okay.
Not to argue, but just to say,
I
right.
would like to know where my notes come from. If it's me, I'll put a little star next to it
Okay.
saying, "Oh, this was my idea."
Well, let's see. Let's just see. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to keep that. Let's just keep that open for now. Okay. So let's see. Bnei HaElohim, right? I said this doesn't mean sons of God. This doesn't mean divine beings. It doesn't have to. I'm not saying there aren't interpretations that say it, but Rashi is not happy with that. Okay. And basically, you'll see. Bnei Hasarim v'Hashoftim. We're talking about people who were rulers and judges. Right? So B'nai could mean the sons of rulers and judges. Yes, it could. But just like we say bar mitzvah, right? It doesn't mean son of a commandment. It means one who is liable or who is responsible for the commandments. So the issue here is that they were essentially people that were very powerful people. So, but let's take a look, right? Here we go. There is another interpretation. So I may have to back up on what I said, but that is Rashi's first interpretation. Davar acher, another interpretation. Whoops, right? Bnei ha'Elohim, sons of ha'Elohim, hem hasarim, okay? These are, I believe, angels. Ha'holchim b'shlichuto shel makom, who went on the mission of the Holy One, meaning of God. Af Haim, they too. So he is understanding Bnei Elohim as meaning divine beings. Okay. Af Haim Hayu mitarvim bahim. They too were so attractive with these gorgeous women that they, even though they were angels, they were divine beings. But as I said, Rashi goes with the top one. And if we're going to go with the second one, that forces me into a more literary interpretation of what's going on here. Kol Elohim Shebamikra. Rashi says that when you come across the word Elohim in scripture, Lashon Marut, it has the connotation of dominion, right? Dominion. That's what it's got to do. When it talks about Elohim, it's talking about domination, dominion, that kind of idea. And he says the following will give proof to what I'm saying. Chapter 4 of the book of Exodus, Va'ata tielo le'Elohim. This is where where Aaron comes to meet Moses after Moses has been commissioned to speak to Pharaoh to take the Jewish people out of slavery. And where Aaron comes and God says to Moses, you will be Aaron's Elohim, meaning you're going to tell him what to do. He is going to have to submit to your authority. So dominion, maybe authority, I'll put in as well. Let's put that in. Okay, so there's one example. And then also Exodus 10, it says, Re'ei netaticha Elohim. This is where he's saying to Moses, God is saying to Moses that he is making him Elohim over Pharaoh, that he is giving him authority over Pharaoh or dominion over Pharaoh. And of course, Moses is a human being. That's the point. That the issue of Elohim is authority. And that's why we say, when we say Adonai Eloheinu in the Shema, it means we believe in God, but we also accept God's authority over us. Two different things. One can believe in God and still not accept God's authority, or you can believe in God and believe that God has authority over us, which is precisely what the purpose is of the mitzvot. The divine commandments is to allow us a way to actually live accepting God's authority. Ki tovot hena, for they were good. Amar Rabbi Yudin. Now notice, by the way, I'm not saying that he's going, okay. So Rashi's the point is this, it's pronounced tovot, right? But notice there's no vav in this word at all, right? So this Rabbi Yudan, who we already quoted once, he has comments to make about this section, right? He says, tavat ketiv, something like that, right? Keshahayu mativin ota, that is to say, that they would make them look beautiful, even more beautiful, right? They would perfect her, something like that. Mekushetet likanes lakupa. So sorry, this is when they were dressed up like as a bride, right? They would be adorned, mekushetet, adorned likanes lakupa, to come into the wedding canopy. In other words, about to be married. Haya gadol, this great person, nichnas, he would go in, uvu Allah, and he would have relations with her, tchila, to begin with. Right? So if you've heard of this, they had this kind of thing, went on definitely in medieval times, and they had something called lex prima noctis, which would mean the law of the first night. And it was a way, of course, it isn't just the pleasure, it's a way of pushing authority. We know that there is a dominating nature to the sexual act, to the act of intercourse. And this was a way of showing the peasants who was exactly in charge. And look at this. We're saying this was going on for a long time. Mikol asher bacharu. Now this goes on to say, from any whom they chose. From any whom they chose, they did this. Af beulat baal, even someone who was married, even a married woman. Af hazachar, even a male, v'habahima, and animals. So this is what was going on at this particular time. And we're going to have to stop here, and hopefully, let's see, God willing, next week we will have another opportunity to go on with this and see what's going on. But we're being given now the background to the flood. So, human behavior. And of course, the question is, are these things going on these days? Do we see this kind of behavior, some of which we wouldn't even want to talk about? Maybe some of these countries where they're absolute dictators and things like that. Who knows? Who knows? Okay. I mean, given the fact that we heard about a soldier being executed for falling asleep during the speech of a dictator, do you think the dictator might be doing other things besides if he has that kind of control over people? So we'll stop the share here. Okay. And that's where things are now. So thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.